perseverance. Our speaker today is Chief of Staff and Chief of Operations at JILA, Beth Kroger. Beth is a leader who keeps JILA and the people of JILA organized and moving. Beth, thank you so much for being part of this series and for choosing this topic for this fall. As always, we are grateful to JILA and JILA's team for excellence in diversity and inclusivity, which I love to say spells out JEDI at the University of Colorado Boulder. Thank you everyone for being part of today's experience. And now here's an overview of today's program. We'll begin with our introductions of our speaker and key team members, and then Beth will take the floor to present today's STEM chat.
Thank you.
Beth welcomes everyone to ask questions during her talk. You do not need to wait until the end of her STEM chat to pose your question. When something comes to mind, put it in the chat and we'll call on you to ask your question directly of Beth. Remember that all questions are good questions, so ask away and post your questions in the chat function. During the talk today, we're also going to collaborate in a word cloud, and after we've all collaborated in creating that cloud, we'll have a final piece to send to everybody at the end of today's event. And now I'd like to introduce my co-host for today and for each of these sessions, Bea Petner. Bea holds degrees in mathematics and fashion design and is now living out her childhood dream of being a fashion designer. She will tell you from firsthand experience that design has everything to do with science and math. And now, Bea, you have the floor.
Thank you, Heidi. And thank you all so much for being here today. I'm just going to start with going over our guidelines, which you can also find in the chat. So after we introduce our team and before I introduce Beth, we'll ask you to also introduce yourselves and to say your first name, the grade you're in, and also your favorite subject. During the talk, if possible, please leave your camera on. Make sure that you have good internet connection. If you can, to change the Zoom name to your name if you're using someone else's account, but no worries if you can't. Mute your sound when you're not speaking. And again, as Heidi said, ask your questions as you think of them during the presentation. You can write your questions in the chat and then we will call on you to ask your questions to Beth. Every question is a good question. Please ask what's on your mind. And then when asking a question, please repeat your name and grade. And now I'm so excited to introduce Gail. Gail Geschwind is someone who loves to participate in outreach programs that make a positive and meaningful impact in others' lives. This is what she did when she helped found JEDI, JILA Excellence in Diversity and Inclusivity, a group which helps promote diversity as an integral element of Collaborative Research Institute. JEDI functions alongside her work as a graduate student in the physics department at CU Boulder, where she does single molecule biophysics research, focusing on the mechanical and energetic properties of nucleic acid structures. Gail received her BS in physics and math from Stony Brook University, New York. Gail, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for that great introduction. So like Bea said, I'm Gail. I'm a graduate student, and you can basically think of it like I'm in 21st grade. So I went to high school, I finished 12th grade, I went to 4 years of college, decided that wasn't enough and continued on. So now I'm in 21st grade. And I study biophysics at JILA. JILA is a collaboration between CU Boulder, which is a college here, and the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is a government lab. And there is so much really interesting and diverse research happening there. So we have people studying astrophysics, lasers, atoms, molecules, and even people making the most precise clocks in the entire world. I am also involved in an organization called JEDI, which we already talked about. And we work on making sure that we've got a very diverse environment at JILA, especially including making sure we can get more girls interested in science. Inclusivity and diversity are super important for so many reasons. As like a less selfish reason, the more diverse backgrounds we have in science, the better the research outcomes are, because we have people tackling problems from so many different approaches. But more selfishly, the reason that I joined JEDI is that it can be really hard to be the only woman in a physics class. And in fact, I had never had a female physics professor teach any of my classes until one day I had a substitute and she came into one of my classes and taught it. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I had never had that experience before. So selfishly, I'm hoping to get more women involved so that no one has to be the only one who looks like them in any sort of STEM scenario. And one of our most important messages is that science is for everyone. I know that you're going to love today's talk, but before we get to that, I'm going to turn it back over to Bea.
Thank you so much. And at this time, we'll ask you to introduce yourselves. And when you introduce yourself, if you want to say your first name, the grade you're in, and then your favorite subject or, your favorite area of study. So I'm going to start. Lucy, if you want to unmute and introduce yourself.
So I'm Lucy. I'm in 6th grade, and I don't know.
And then Althea, if you want to introduce yourself.
I'm Althea. I'm in 6th grade, and I like math.
Awesome. And then Kimo7176, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sorry about that. Kim Monteleone is my full name. I work at JILA as a community engagement coordinator. My favorite subject is impossible to say in one word, but I'll just sum it up with art.
And then Jack, the user Jack, if you want to introduce yourself. I might hop over to Jane if you would introduce yourself, and then.
Hi, I'm Jane. I have spent 45 years in education, all of it.
Oh, I think you might have gone on mute, Jane. I'm so sorry.
Okay, sorry if I was starting over. I've spent 45 years in education, many of which have been in encouraging females to get involved in science and math. Yes, you can do science, and yes, you can do math, but also looking to add the arts into STEM.
Awesome. And then Jack, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, how do I get myself on here? I've unmuted.
Oh, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, so I don't need to have my picture up there.
Oh, we can also see you.
Well, how come I can't see myself? Anyway, okay, I'm retired educator. I taught and did research in science at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, and I did that for 50 years before I retired. And I retired about 4 years ago, and I had 2 daughters that became scientists and majored in science. And my youngest daughter got her science degree at University of Colorado at Boulder. And she got her master's and PhD at University of Colorado at Boulder. So I'm a CU dad and a retiree from CSU, Colorado State University. And my granddaughter is now in high school and in Lafayette, Colorado. And yeah, she's a sophomore in high school and is also interested in science.
Awesome. Thank you so much for everyone introducing themselves. And at this point, I am so excited to also introduce our speaker, Beth. So have any of you, and it sounds like maybe have ever been the only female in your math or science class or even workplace, and maybe it felt intimidating or awkward or any range of emotions. Well, Beth Kroger didn't let that stop her when she faced experiences of being the only female in the room. Let me tell you more about her triumphs throughout her many experiences. Beth Kroger currently is the Chief of Operations and Staff at JILA. Beth graduated from Dakota Wesleyan University with a BA in Business Management and from the University of South Dakota with an MBA. Beth was selected as the inaugural Thrivent Fellow for Leadership, taught leadership at the college level, studied academic leadership at Harvard University, and has given numerous talks on leadership. Before joining JILA, Beth worked in private colleges and public universities, primarily as a vice president for finance and administration. She has a passion for people and doing what she can to support and encourage the discovery and development of each person's unique gifts, skills, and talents. Beth enjoys biking, gardening, reading sci-fi and fantasy novels, painting, and spending time with her family, including her dogs, Bilbo Baggins and Obi-Wan. And now, Beth, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here, and I'm so excited to have this time to spend with all of you. I'm hoping you can see my screen just to make sure. A thumbs up. Okay, great. So before we begin, we talked about creating a word cloud together. And so at the bottom of this slide, you can see that I'm asking you to put 1 or 2 words in chat or more that mean perseverance to you. And then Gail is kindly going to let me know when the word cloud is ready to show. But please go ahead and share a word or 2 words or 10 of what you think of when you think of perseverance.
Just
So
a quick note,
I'm sorry.
You're in a presenter mode, so we can see like the presenter mode instead of the full screen.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'll fix that quickly. How about now? Okay, great. So while you're doing that and putting in your words on perseverance, I thought I'd show you some very important slides, which are of my dogs. This is Bilbo Baggins. He's a Wheaten Terrier. Well, he was a puppy and then all grown up and cool with his sunglasses. And here's Obi-Wan, who's a Golden Retriever. And so we mentioned them in our intro, and I thought you should probably see them. And I've actually never done a presentation without them in it. And this is just my motto right now. The older you get, the better you get, unless you're a banana. So that was your thinking time while you were putting words into chat, and hopefully that gave you enough time to write something down for Gail. And we'll get started. So these are some of the words that I came up with when I thought about perseverance. And it's a good word, and there are lots of words that mean pretty much the same thing. But whatever word you use, the point is going after what you want, your passion, what inspires you, what is interesting to you, and going after that with relentlessness, with focus, and with perseverance. So Gail, are you ready to show the word cloud, or do you want me to keep moving forward?
I think we're good. I think I got everyone's responses in there, and some of my own also, even though I didn't put mine in the chat.
Okay, great. So here's the word cloud you just created. Resilience shows up. I'm hoping you can see the word cloud, but the words resilience comes up, dedication, persistence, grit, don't give up. I love that one. Not quitting, continuing, stick with it. Great. So we're all on the same page and kind of have a good idea of what we mean by persistence. And just to make sure you're back on the slide, correct? The PowerPoint? Okay, great. Thank you. So guess what? Each of you have already persevered. So think about some of the hard times you've gone through already. You've persevered and here you are. Don't assume that others haven't also gone through hard times. They have, or at least most of them have. Some people tend to hide their hardships and some don't, but they're there and they exist. As an example, a couple of years ago, we had a get together with some of our friends that we have known basically my whole life since high school. We grew up together, we got married, we had kids, we had moved ahead in our careers. And that weekend, just a couple years ago, we were talking about what was going on in our lives. And we looked around after we'd been talking for a while and we realized that 4 out of the 5 couples had serious struggles with mental illness in our immediate families. Why didn't we know that? Why did I always think that it was me and my family going through this and everybody else was okay? Why did I wonder or wish that I could be more like that other person or that other family that seemed to have everything all figured out and it was just me who was struggling? And that conversation made me really realize we're all struggling, we all have hardships, and we're all persevering, whether or not it's obvious. And so that was really helpful for me to be reminded of that. So I wanted just to take a minute and see if anybody wanted to share in chat or verbally of a time when you got through a hardship or overcame an obstacle or persevered through a failure. And it's okay if you don't want to share. I realize that's putting a lot out there, so it's perfectly fine. But does anybody want to share anything? Okay, we'll move forward and that's perfectly okay. But I know each of you can think of something in your lives that you've already persevered through. So you're going to have days like this, right? I call it burrito blanket days, when you need to curl up and think about things. And that's okay. You're human, I'm human, and sometimes, to put it bluntly, life just sucks. It always helps me to remember that's just a day. It's not always going to be this way. It wasn't always this way. I remember the last time I had a bad, sad, mad day. I've had good days since then, and I'll have good days again. It's okay to have the bad days. You can persist and you can persevere and you can get through it. You're also going to have days like this. So persevere in following your dream. There's an author named Joseph Campbell, and he talked about following your bliss. And to me, his whole point was to persevere, to follow your dream. One of my favorite quotes from him is, if you do follow your bliss, you put yourself on a kind of track that has been there all the while waiting for you. You begin to meet people who are in the field of your bliss, and they open doors to you. You follow your bliss and don't be afraid, and doors will open where you didn't know they were going to be. Doors will open for you that wouldn't have opened for anyone else. So you don't have to have your whole career or your life or your journey planned out, but you do want to be clear on your destination, your bliss, your passion, what you love to do. And your destination doesn't need to be a specific job or living in a certain place, although it can be. And your destination and journey to that can wander around a bit and not be a straight line, and that's okay. You're going to go through doors, you're going to meet people, experiencing and learning things that you'll need to know. You'll get to your destination as long as you stay true to and persevere towards your passion, your dreams. Your plans and dreams are going to change, and that's just fine. When I was young, I was obsessed with horses. I liked Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh because he was the closest thing to a horse. When we went to Mexico and all my brothers and sisters bought piñatas, I bought one too. Mine was a donkey because that was the closest thing to a horse. I had a pony that ran for the barn and dumped me in the water hole almost every time I rode it. I kept riding it. Then I got a bigger pony and trained it to pull a pony cart. And then I got a horse and trained it through 4-H and did horse shows. I rode my bike about 5 miles one way every day to the place where we kept my horse. And then I would try to catch him, which could take up to an hour because he would run in circles around me, not letting him catch him. But I rode him every day and taught him to do different things and just had fun being on that horse. He was a scruffy little horse, but he was mine. And all the other horses were big and beautiful compared to my Dusty. But during one horse show, the judge stopped the show and brought me into the center of the ring. He then announced to the whole crowd and all the others that I was competing against that my horse and I were the best team he had seen in the whole horse show. Dusty got too old, so I got another horse. He bucked me off and broke my arm. I kept riding. And then I bought a colt and raised it from a colt to a show horse. And my dreams were complete. I followed my passion and lived that dream. And then my life changed and I needed to move on. I didn't have the time or ability to spend hours every day on a horse. And that wasn't a sad thing. I was ready for another dream. I was ready for another destination. But everything I learned from training horses, I still use today. Patience, understanding that people, just like horses, are all very different and have different gifts and abilities and needs. And knowing that the only way to achieve is to put in the time, to persevere through the setbacks and the difficulties. Persevere in celebrating your journey. What do I mean by that? I mean that everybody's learning, everybody's at a different stage of their journey. Everyone was where you are now. Don't be intimidated by those who seem to know more. They may not. They may just be faking it pretty well, but they may also know more. They grew, you're going to grow too. They kept learning, you will too. When they were the scientist who won the Nobel Prize in physics, when he was in 6th grade, or she, they knew just what you know. They kept learning. So celebrate the journey and where you are in it. Persevere when you fail. Other people fail, you will fail. I've failed for sure, a lot. When I was a freshman in college, I wasn't quite ready for college. I have an entire semester of F's on my college transcript. That's okay. I was promoted to a vice president of the college when I was 29. I got through it, I persevered. Sometimes it's more comfortable to other people if you do fail, or if you act like they expect you to, or they want you to. So what do you do when you're the only woman in the room or the lab or the office? You stand strong in who you are and not who others may see you as or who others might want you to be. My first professional job, on my very first day, I told 2 lies. I've never regretted either. I was hired into a CPA accounting practice and I was the only female and much younger than the others, as I was right out of college. And back then, women were often seen as secretaries or clerks as less than the men, and the business world was very male dominated. So back to my 2 lies. The first one of the partners came to me shortly after I came to work on my first day and said, "Could you make coffee for us?" I lied and said I didn't know how to make coffee. Why? because making coffee for the men would have lessened my standing, my equality with the other male professionals. The second lie came that same morning. Another senior partner came to my desk and asked if I could type a letter. I said, no, I didn't know how to type. I wasn't going to be put into the stereotypical role of a secretary. I was an accountant just like all the men there. It may not seem very admirable to lie, and I question whether I should be telling you all to lie, and that's not my point. But the point is that while I could have handled that differently in hindsight, the point is not to let others define who you are. You know who you are, and you know what you're good at. So persevere in your self-belief. Along the way, you're going to be shaken, maybe to the very core of who you are or who you think you are or who you want to be. But it is through hardship and failure that I've learned my most meaningful lessons. One of the best things that ever happened to me professionally was the day I got fired. Boy, oh boy, did that hit me hard. I was a failure. I couldn't do things right. I didn't succeed. What should I have done differently? A lot of self-doubt. And then I realized that I should be focusing on what I could do really well and what my passion was, and persevere through the failure to really focus on being the best I could be at what I did well. Persevere in learning. Life is the sum of your choices. You'll choose well sometimes, and sometimes you won't choose so well. But always choose to learn what you can from people, from situations, from failures, from successes. Think about the worst teacher that you ever had. What can you learn from them? Sometimes you can learn what not to do. Think about the best teacher you ever had. What can you learn from them? Learn from good people and pay it forward. You often learn little things that don't seem like they're important, but the little things can make all the difference. One of my first jobs in a university was as the person who collected payment from the students for their college bill, which was not a really very fun job, but I did my best. And sometimes the students had real difficult times and couldn't pay their bills on time. And I worked really hard to help them out and to be understanding, because I really knew what it was like not to have money to pay my bills. I did a lot of different things for a lot of students to help them. Now I'm on the board of trustees in that university. And a few years ago, when I was at a dinner honoring people who gave gifts to the university, I sat by a young man. Well, he was young to me. He was probably in his late 20s, early 30s. And I introduced myself and he just stared at me. And then he said, "I'm so glad to sit with you. I have wanted to tell you something for years and never thought I'd have the chance." He said he owed me his career and his thanks, because if it hadn't been for me, he would have had to drop out of college because he couldn't pay his college bill. Honestly, it took me a long time to remember him, although I finally did, because what I had done for him, I had done for so many students. It never occurred to me that doing my job and treating people with kindness, respect, and understanding would ever really have an impact. And that was a great lesson to learn. And I learned that from that young man. So keep learning, persevere in learning. Learn what you can from every person. Persevere in being you. I like who I am, but I couldn't always say that. Growing up, I very often felt like I didn't fit in. I matured much earlier than the other girls in my class. I was the tallest person in my class for years. I stood out because of that, when all I wanted to do was fit in. I didn't do the hair and makeup thing. I still don't. I was a total klutz, still true. I was smart, but I spent a lot of time and effort to hide that because I didn't want to stand out. It's taken me a long time, and it may take you a long time too, but I want you to know this. You are an amazing person. Don't listen to that voice in your head or to those voices around you that try to tear you down, make you seem less than. There is only one person in this entire world who can do what you can do, and that's you. Only one person who thinks exactly as you do. Only one person who can impact the world as you do. Persevere in supporting each other. I'm lucky that I had some mentors who saw something in me, who pushed me to expand my horizons, provided opportunities, and told me the truth that I needed to hear even when I didn't want to. These women supported me, and I pay it forward by doing the same. And that's why I'm here today. One woman's success expands the opportunities and potential for all of us. Don't compete with each other, but support each other. That doesn't at all mean don't strive to be the best you can be, but just remember, supporting somebody else's success can help you succeed also. You'll be seen as a leader, a collaborator, a contributor, someone that makes everyone better, even while they pursue their own excellence. And finally, persevere in this pursuit of science. Keep in mind that you don't have to be a scientist to pursue and advance science. Science doesn't happen in a vacuum. Okay, well, some science does happen in a vacuum, but what I'm talking about here is that it takes a whole team of people with a huge variety of skills and talents and gifts to make science work. I'm not a scientist, but my work is critical to the world-leading science that we do at JILA. We're a team, and the scientists can do things I can't do, and I can do things the scientists can't do. It takes everyone to make science happen. And I've just listed here all the different roles that are critical to a science research institute like JILA, whether it's having good building systems and facilities, making equipment and fabricating it and designing it, handling the finance, helping scientists communicate about the science that they do, leadership, problem solving. All of those things are critical to making science happen. And in closing, I just want to say thank you so much for listening, and I hope that this was helpful to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that wonderful talk. And I think we have time for maybe just one or two questions. So if you have a question, please place your questions for Beth in the chat function. We'll then gather that question and call on you. Remember, every question is a good question. And when we call on you, to just unmute yourself, say your name, where you're from, and grade level, and then ask your question. So if there's any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat.
I'm going to start the questions here. Beth, what advice would you give to your sixth grade self on perseverance?
I think the biggest thing I would say to my sixth grade self is to be more confident in who I was and my abilities, and not to try to hide that. And I'm not sure how that corresponds to perseverance, but maybe just in being proud of who you are, persevere in that and celebrate who you are as an individual. And, you know, I didn't always fit in very well with my classmates. I kind of marched to my own different drummer. And I wish I had known more clearly that that was okay. That's how it should be. And that different drummer or whatever you want to call it is really a great thing. And it's much better to not fit in than to fit in. So persevere in being weird, odd,
Right.
different.
Right. And yet it's tough at the time.
Oh, so hard, so hard,
Painful.
because yeah, you want to fit in. You don't want to stand out. You don't
That's
want the attention, or not that kind of attention. Right, yeah, absolutely. So Althea asked, what do I do for my job? So that's a great question, Althea. And so, you know, my last slide was all the different things that need to happen to have science work, whether it's building or equipment or communications. And so that's really what I do, is make sure all those other parts of science are working and available to help the science in the labs. And so that could be helping a scientist figure out how to keep the temperature stable in their labs so that they can do their experiment. Or it could be helping somebody work with a graduate student who's having trouble and how to help them succeed in giving them advice. Or it could be figuring out the government's rules on certain things related to research and saying, here's how we have to do that to follow the rules of the government. Or even something as simple as figuring out if we have enough money to buy a piece of equipment that a scientist wants. So kind of all those things around the edge of science. That was a great question.
Awesome. Okay, so at this part, I think that I have two really exciting announcements, and thank you so much, Beth, for your wonderful talk and all of the great questions. So inspiring. And two exciting announcements. The first is that we will see you back here on December 14th for How to Fail Forward. No is not a scary word. And our speaker will be Kenna Castleberry, Science Communications Officer at JILA. And then super exciting is to mark your calendars for December 21st, when we will bring you a bonus session of She Has the Floor. Our speaker will be Dr. Judith Olson, and she was recently named Next Generation Leader of the Year among women in information technology, and you will absolutely love meeting her. I'd also love to give a huge thank you to Beth for your wonderful talk today, to JILA and JEDI, and to every girl and every family member who attended. And now I will pass it back to Heidi.
I just want to add the thanks to our team who makes everything possible in this series and every day at Pretty Brainy. Thank you to our technical director and manager of marketing, data, and analytics, Crystal Bordner. Our content creator is Kenna Castleberry. Our diva for social media is Amber Cruz. Our number crunchers are Jesse Ann Lee and John David. Our ambassadors are Katie Schutt, who's actually studying at CU Boulder on the Betcher Scholarship, Madsie Boyles, who is studying at Colorado State University, and Emma Younger, who is in her second year at Colorado School of Mines. Our board members are Dr. Mina Bogopal, Don Putney, and Robin Steele. From B and from myself, thank you. Have a great rest of your November 30, and we'll see you back here on December 14. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.